Hey there, Live Like Your Nail Color gals. It's been shown that positive daily interactions with all kinds of people, family, friends, neighbors, colleagues, even people we encounter as we go about our days, helps us thrive personally and professionally. And yet, we live in an era where an increasing number of obstacles prevent us from communicating and conversing well or at all with others. What can we do to make it easier, more pleasant, and more rewarding to converse and connect, and to do it with greater authenticity, ease, and confidence? Today's gal pal, Patti DeNucci, a networking and communication expert, takes on this challenge with her latest book called More Than Just Talk, the essential guide for anyone who wants to enjoy better conversations. In fact, we had such a great conversation that we went longer than planned, but it didn't feel like it. You ever had one of those? So I decided to split our convo into 2 episodes so that you can truly soak in all of Patti's ideas and inspiration. But first, before we dive into part 1 of our conversation, have you taken my quiz yet to determine your nail color persona? All you have to do is go to livelikeyournailcolor.com/quiz. Answer a few quick questions, and in your results, discover your specific nail color persona, your built-in strengths, and how to tap into those strengths when chip happens. Again, go to livelikeyournailcolor.com/quiz. Now let's get talking with Patti.
Tired of so much chip happening? Discouraged by so much downer news? Weary from chronic crisis? Don't let the chips keep you down. Welcome to the Live Like Your Nail Color podcast, where the tips of your fingers and toes are ready to inspire you to not give up and to keep creating the business, career, and life you want. In each episode, we flip the chip and let our fun nail color with that crazy fun name cheer us on to remember our strengths, embrace the power of choice, see life as an adventure, and know resilience is only a touch-up or change-up away. Get ready for a good time and a good laugh with your host, Mary Foley.
Welcome back, Live Like Your Nail Color gals. Every day, all day, one thing is true about you and me and everyone listening. We're having conversations, either with yourself or with someone else. That's a lot of talking. And even though you do it all the time, what would it take to have better conversations? You know, the kind where you're left feeling excited, encouraged, and heard? What would you need to do differently to converse and connect more easily, authentically, and meaningfully? Yes, even if you don't consider yourself the conversation queen. Well, that's what we're going to explore on today's episode. Through a conversation, of course, and with a gal who has been intrigued for a long time by what it takes to have better conversations. For as long as she can remember, Patti DeNucci has been a keen observer of what works and what doesn't when it comes to having better conversations. Some call this networking, but she says it's more than that. Her pursuit has led her to being an author, speaker, and facilitator to help organizational teams and event participants learn how to attract, experience, and enjoy more rewarding connections. That's what her latest book is all about. It's called More Than Just Talk, the essential guide for anyone who wants to enjoy better conversations. So let's get into this so that it's more than me just talking. Hey, Patti, welcome to the Live Like Your Nail Color podcast.
Thanks, Mary. Appreciate the great introduction and all the good build up to that. That was fantastic.
I know we better have a good conversation now.
I know.
Well,
you totally get me, girl.
Before we get into your expertise and we want to learn about how to have better conversations, I always ask my guest to take my What's Your Nail Color Persona quiz and reveal the results so we can get to know you a bit better. So what's your nail color persona and did it nail you?
It did nail me, and it's a 2-part answer.
Okay.
1, my fingers are Naked Nelly, and my toes are Solid Sister.
You know, I think I need to start taking looking back and all my guests, like a poll. There are so many Naked Nellies on their fingertips, but they got some fun going on their toes, right? And you know, it really is the most common. So lots of times when I say, oh, live like your nail color, they'll go, oh, I don't do my nails. And I'll say, do you do your toenails? Oh, yeah. I'm like, toenails count, right?
I think we're not scooping laundry out of the washing machine with our toes. or
Yes.
playing in the paint or the garden or,
Okay, so either Naked Nelly or Solid Sister, why did just pick one of those and why did it nail you?
Well, I think with Naked Nelly, I try really hard to be authentic. I can't really help myself.
It's a hazard.
And you get to a certain age, and I won't reveal what that is, but you just don't, it's just too much work to try to be somebody else. And so, and I'm very utilitarian, and I like to get my hands in the middle of things. I paint, I am walking dogs. It's the nail color never lasts, or I'm picking at it because it just doesn't seem like it should be there. So I don't know, that's probably too much information.
That's okay. I'm sure there's a lot of guys listening who can relate. So what about the Solid Sister? How did that nail you?
Well, I like to have pretty toes. I mean, I live in Texas. We wear sandals as much as possible. At least I do. And I want to express myself via my toes. So, and I think you asked me a little bit, and maybe this is premature to talk about color, but
that's what I was going to ask you next. Like, what's your favorite go-to color then for the Solid Sister?
Well, it varies between pinks and corals and darker reds. And right now I have an OPI color on my toes that I don't even think you can get anymore. And I don't remember what it is, but it's sort of a bricky iridescent red that's kind of wintry and Christmassy. So that's what I'm wearing now. I think one time when we went to Santorini on vacation, I did the blue toenails. And then I read later that is such an American thing to do. So I'm not doing that next time.
You just don't like to be so like predictable is what you're saying.
Right. Yeah.
But you were celebrating. Okay.
The colors, and I just go, I don't think I can do it.
So pink.
What about your color?
Well,
do you have?
Well, right now, and you can see me because we're recording this via Zoom. I have on naked nails on my fingers as well. Mainly because my nails have said I need a break. They're chipping a little bit more. Anyway, and so I was like, all right. But on my toes, my go-to is red. It's one of my colors, and I love it.
It's one of your signature colors. It's one of your branding colors. That makes perfect sense.
It does. It is. And what I found was for the Live Like Your Nail Color podcast, there are 3 main colors with that. One is red. One is a pink, kind of a medium pink. And then the other one I'd call a light tan or champagne color. The reason is that even though I like red, you obviously like red sometimes too, is one of your colors. A lot of women like pink. Those two are the top 2. And then the third favorite color overall for nail colors these days is a cream or so I was like, let me go with the 3 really go-to colors that come up again and again. Now today, the cool thing is there's all like the whole crayon Corolla box of colors are available.
Yes.
And it's fun. And then beyond the color, there are these designs. There's glitter. There's all these other kind of designs that you can have. So I love that it's expanding. So I always ask, that's why I always ask, what's your go-to fave color?
Yeah. Well, I go to just a little secret. I go to the nail salon and I look around me at what everybody's doing. And I'm secretly jealous on one level that they're getting so adventurous. And then I remember, I'm the most, this is me. This is me. And I think that's a metaphor for a lot of things in life.
Right.
Is, have some fun, experiment a little, but sometimes we end up coming back to who we really are.
I think that's always the case, actually. And that's why my joke is you could take these really in-depth assessments that might cost you some money and have like a bazillion questions. And then you have this big report afterwards. And hey, I've done them. I've benefited from them. Or you could just take my What's Your Nail Color Persona quiz and get to it really quickly. And then go, I like pink. It means that I'm, the quintessential female color and I'm very friendly and chatty. Great. I'm putting on hot pink today. Right. So it's something. But the Solid Sister part really, when you said that, and I didn't know your results beforehand, I thought, yep, my experience with you, Patti, is that you're one of these solid, reliable people. And there is there's a depth to you. From the very first time we talked, I get introduced. And then later I was invited to a table where we enjoyed wine, which over dinner, which, I thought, okay, I like her even more, right? Because she's like, what's a good red Italian wine?
Yeah.
But I say that kind of jokingly, but that was your authenticity of being a solid sister showed up. and I wasn't looking at your toenails at the time. So I want to get into this topic of better conversations. You've been, ever since I've known you, you've been writing, speaking, facilitating workshops. You've been writing books. This is your second book we're going to really dive into, but they've always been about the topic of conversing and connecting.
Yeah.
So why is this topic so important to you?
There's a couple of reasons. One is it's just been a continuing thread through my life. My parents were very good socializers, conversationalists. My dad was more gregarious and he was more extroverted. My mom was more introverted and gracious. I'm kind of a combination of the two. But I think the really big thing is when I think all the listeners can hopefully agree that when you look back on the best friendships you've ever had, the best opportunities you've ever heard about, the coolest things that have ever happened to you, the resources, the lessons, the mentors, it's all about conversation. It is probably the number one, and I'm not even going to say soft skill. I'm going to say the number one skill that a person can have. I did a ton of research on my new book and read studies and articles and, Harvard Business Review pieces. And time and again, people agreed, experts agreed, being able to converse and connect well is your ticket to a lot of benefits. And we can go through some of those, when you're ready, because the list is long and surprising.
Yeah.
Surprising.
Well, I do want to get into some of that. I want to, before that, you made me think about like this number one skill. And thank you that you didn't call it soft skill. And it's actually, it's one of the hardest soft skills if you want to go there, right? Kind of thing. But I still remember when I was in engineering school, right? So now I'm in my early 20s and, I barely got into engineering school. All right. So I still got in, but I got in based on the whole picture of Mary, not just my SATs. Today's SAT scores or whatever scores are taken today, probably wouldn't get in. But I just remember it was my junior year and we had electives and I decided to take public speaking. And many of my engineering colleagues were like, what? Why are you doing that? And we'd had this generic term called a widget. They probably still do. It's like the thing you might make up, you might. And so I said, well, because if you create a widget and you can't talk about it, it doesn't matter.
Mm-hmm.
And
That's so true.
It because I realized because you're uncomfortable with it. Because their biggest skill set and the way that their brains operated were far more in this engineering mindset, like the left brain, sometimes it's called, but the right brain, the communication skills, they didn't feel as comfortable. So they kind of scurried over and always held on to the thing they were most comfortable with. And that's what they were getting rewarded for in classes. And later they would get it in a job. As it turns out, though, I have been able to do far more than engineering based on my ability to talk. So, and it's really communicate, right? So that was a nugget that you just said that made me feel very good for not being so good.
Good. No, it's not a soft skill. It's a really important skill. Really, it's basic. It's basic.
But it's basic, but it's not necessarily one that even though we do it all the time, we're any better at it. We've just gotten good enough to either get by or what we think we need. So I want to go to your new book because the title again, I love this title, More Than Just Talk. The essential guide for anyone who wants to enjoy better conversations. So I love that it's a guide, by the way.
Thank you.
And so the first thing is, why'd you decide to write a book on having better conversations? You obviously didn't say essential guide to anyone who wants to have worse conversations.
Nobody needs more of those right now, for sure.
Right, that's true. Okay, but why did you decide to write this topic now?
I feel like it's the prequel. I started out, when I wrote The Intentional Networker, and that came out in 2011, a while back, but which is still a very timely guide. Yeah, I was still getting questions from readers, from followers, from audience participants, people at cocktail parties, asking me more questions about, the networking is really important, but, the conversation part, it's awkward. It's, I don't want to have someone talk my ear off. I don't want to get cornered by that person. I don't know what to say. I don't know what to ask. And I was getting all these questions. And probably 2 or 3 years after The Intentional Networker came out, I started playing with the notion of writing a book about conversation. And my friends and family will even tell you that there was a point pre-pandemic where it's like, don't ask her anymore about the book. Don't ask her, because I don't think she's ever going to finish it. It's taken a long time. But what happened was I got so entrenched in, I thought, how much time is this going to take? I'm the expert, blah, blah, blah. Well, I started doing the research and reading about it, and it was fascinating how much goes into being a good conversationalist, and it's not like it's unachievable. It's just that there are a lot of things that I think people don't know. Like you said it earlier, some of us seem to be quite okay with just talking and, oh, I'm totally comfortable in a social situation. Yeah, but that may mean that doesn't mean you're a good conversationalist. Doesn't mean the other person's having a good time.
Well, in fact, you saying that reminds me of this cocktail napkin that someone gave me years ago. I remember taking a picture of it, which is why I also can recall it. And there's these two women on this cocktail napkin sitting next to each other. And one woman says to the other, "Girl, you're talking, but you ain't saying nothing." And I cracked up laughing because we all know women, in particular, although your dad was very...
I'm meant to.
That they talk. Like, it's not a problem for them to open up their mouth and lots of verbiage to come out.
Yes.
But that's not the same as being a good conversationalist, is it?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. The gift of gab is not necessarily a gift if you don't use it properly. With great gifts come great responsibility. But I'm going to explain why, just really briefly, without getting too geeky about it. I go into it more. There's a whole section in my book about talking and listening. But talking is very expressive. It's relieving. It feels really good. And this is not for everybody, but for a lot of us. And it's easy to get on a roll and to just not be able to stop. And so one of the little tips, there's a couple of them I'm just going to throw out there. One of them is that after 40 seconds in a social situation, stop talking, take a breath, give the other person a chance to jump in. The other rule is if you're in a one-on-one talking to someone like a coffee or, just casual conversation with your flight partner, your person that's sitting next to you on an airplane, 60-40, listen 60% of the time, talk 40% of the time. So erring on the side of listening, which I know we can dive into more at some point here. But I think the thing is, talking is so expressive and it's easier, and listening is different than hearing. Hearing is a physiological, you're hearing noises, you're taking in stimulation. Hearing and really listening, when you add on the listening, and there are many levels of that, you've got what's going on in your own brain. You've got what you're hearing. You're trying to put some meaning into what the person's saying. You've got your own inner dialogue. You're trying to comport yourself and not jump in and interrupt, which is really hard. I'm a chronic interrupter. I'm sorry. It's sort of like going to, a conversation anonymous. I'm the interrupter. But hearing and listening just take a lot more processing time. And I think that's what makes it hard.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I don't know how many seconds you just talked there, but I was
a long time, way too long.
No, I was tracking with you. I will. Here's a little intel for those who have been listening to the Live Like Your Nail Color podcast for a while. I go back and I pre-record these for many reasons, including scheduling, but I re-listen. And particularly early on, I thought to myself, "Mary, will you just shut up?" Now, I mean, it's a conversation back and forth, but I thought, I just need less airtime, to your point. And I thought, why am I doing that? Because I was more nervous than I appeared. Typically it's that, because something came to my mind and I felt it needed to be expressed. And that's not always the case when you just validated.
Oh,
I thought it doesn't need to come off out of my mouth. I love that what you said about the 40 seconds though, and the 60-40 listening and talking. That's already a great tip right there.
Yeah.
So talking is very expressive.
Yes.
That's one word you said. Listening is very what? What would you describe?
You're taking it in. You're listening. You're listening to the words. if you're in person or you can see the other person, let's say you're not on the phone, say you and I are on a Zoom call right now, we can look at each other. Or you're in person, you can see the person, you're taking in micro expressions, body language, tone of voice. You're trying to imagine, okay, is this what the person really means? Or how do I feel about what the person says? There's a lot going on when you're listening. And it's, there are people like Julian Treasure he's just a hearing guy, a hearing noise sound guy. And he did a TED Talk about listening that was fascinating. The listening section of my book I think it's golden because, honestly, listening, if you were going to name the number one good conversation skill, it's listening. And it's the hardest one. So the whole thing about the gift of gab, I can give you a great example. I was speaking at a networking function last week, and I threw out a question for a table topic for the group to do in small sessions at their table. And the question was something about, how do you describe a good conversation? And there was a woman at the table. I sat down at one of the tables, and the woman at my table who talked first, she didn't even answer the question. She just started going on and on about, oh, I'm really comfortable talking to almost anybody, blah, 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 blah. And she was giving a prime example of the talking's easy for you. You feel comfortable. You feel fascinating. You feel smart. You feel sociable. But she didn't even answer the question. So she clearly wasn't a good listener. And, that's a prime example of, what happens at, when you talk about that cocktail napkin, which I think is hilarious. We gals, you go into a room full of women who've had a glass of wine and are talking, and it is just bubbling with, it's often very positive and lively, which is how much are we really saying to each other and how much are we listening?
That's a good point. In fact, more than once, I've had a female friend, and I think every gal listening has any relationship with, a gal pal, where there's this moment where you're on the phone, you're on Zoom, you're in person. They say, wow, I just had a great conversation, with so-and-so, insert name here, but they're excited. And they so much that they want to tell you. Right. And we know it when we experience it, when we say, I had a great conversation. But from your research, what are some characteristics of, quote, a great conversation? Sounds like from what you just said, it's being a good listener is one aspect.
That's definitely one of it, that there's a balance, a mutual respect for each other. And there's so many ways you could describe a good conversation. And that's one of the things I let people do in my book is I let them really think about and reflect on what would be a good conversation for you, because we're all different, what we're looking for, what is stimulating and interesting to each other. So that's the beginning of it. But I think some universal characteristics of a good conversation, respect, mutual respect, some courage to be authentic and to be a little vulnerable and to not try to put on airs or be impressive, to be real, to offer grace if we have a difference of opinion, to allow each other to be who we are, to not try to convince the other person that, our way is smarter and better and, more ethically responsible, or, you can insert any numbers there. And then there's another one, and that's curiosity. Being curious about the other person, asking good questions. Here's a big one. People over and over again tell me that, oh, small talk, I just hate small talk. Oh, it's so boring. It's like nails on the chalkboard, la, la, la. You go on and on and on. But here's the deal. If you're stuck in a small talky conversation, guess whose responsibility it is to get you out of it? It's you.
Oh, yeah.
We are responsible for the quality of our conversations. If you're in a conversation that's not going the way you want it to, you have the power to manage it, shift it, walk away from it. You also have the responsibility in social settings to be the one who introduces yourself to somebody else. And that comes as a surprise to a lot of people. So, I think feeling empowered, feeling confident without being too much.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And here's one more word I really like. Being a possibilitarian.
that has to be a a new term you made up, right?
Probably. I don't know, but I love it.
A woman of possibility.
I'm sure I'm not the first person that's, made that up, but being a possibilitarian where it's like, I wonder what great conversation we're going to have. Like even before our conversation today, I always set a few intentions and I always am thinking to myself, oh, I wonder what awesome conversation we're going to have. And you could even be a positive possibilitarian and just assume that it's going to be great. It's going to be great. We're going to have fun. And that automatically shifts the energy of whatever's going to happen.
I love these descriptors, and they're easier said than done. Each one. Good listen, mutual respect, courage to be authentic, offer grace for people to be who they are and you to be who you are. Curiosity, asking good questions with that. Be a possibilitarian. I love these words. They're always fun. I immediately what you meant, like the idea of possibility. What might be possible in this conversation, which is like an opening, right?
What am I going to learn? What am I going to learn? How am I going to walk away different or better? It's, oh my gosh, it's just so exciting. I don't know if you can tell I get a little excited about this.
And even after all these years, the book is
after all this time
coming out. So you know what? I was thinking to myself, okay, you got into this and obviously it's not the only thing you're doing, writing the second book, having, you're speaking, you're facilitating, you're coaching, you're doing all these other things as well. You're gathering ideas, thoughts, data, research, etc. You're letting it marinate with you, right? I'm glad it hasn't come out till now.
Me too.
Because why do you say that? I know why I said it.
Well, I mean, golly, before the pandemic, and it's just the whole political climate that we're in right now, I think I would have said, oh, I wish this would have been out sooner because, having a new book and having a second or third book or however many it is makes you a little more desirable as a speaking, participant, as a someone who can, is very engageable. But the timing, I was just talking to a friend yesterday, the whole bit about divine timing. It's going to happen when it happens. And when we can let go a little bit of the control and allow it to hatch when it's ready. I think, I don't know, I couldn't be happier with the timing. I think this is a book, I'm not going to say everybody needs it. Well, first of all, not everybody wants it. And that's why I put on the title for everyone who wants to enjoy good conversation, because there are just going to be people who don't care, and that's fine. But if you're someone who wants to have a good conversation, this book is loaded with, oh my gosh, strategies, tips, stories, self-deprecating stories about me.
Well,
there's a lot of those.
How do we get good judgment from bad judgment, right? I mean, that's the adage. But in fact, here's what's interesting. So last episode, I talked with a gal, Lisa Tilstra. Highly recommend everyone go back to this because we talked about her theme about making life less difficult. And one of the aspects of that was she didn't say right off conversation, but it comes down to at some point, it's integrating the meaningful conversations when you need help, when you don't necessarily need help, when you're struggling to make life less difficult. Be authentic and courageous to share stories. This is why she, on her podcast, interviews people and has conversations with people who want to share some of their stories, because she very much believes in sharing each other's stories. Then that expressive part, like you even said, it feels good and there's some release, but also I can go, if I'm hearing it, I go, oh, they're struggling like I am. I thought I was the only one. And so so this art of better conversations and meaningful conversations is like, if you listen to that podcast with her about making life less difficult, and then you're like, I want to learn how to get better conversations, this becomes a huge pathway.
Oh, definitely.
Life less difficult, but also on the positive side of forwarding it in the way that you would like. Right?
Yeah. I mean, I think, I have an entire section, well, not a section, a chapter or two about that there's vulnerability and authenticity, and just sharing a few human stories about yourself. And I don't mean like spilling your guts, like you just met someone and you're instantly going to spill your guts because you've had 2 martinis, that is not necessarily good. Yeah, too much information can definitely be a problem in many instances, actually. But if you share something that shows you're human, that shows that you've had some struggles, you've made mistakes, you've walked into the business meeting, after having a baby and you have spit up down your back and you didn't know it, honestly, here's a story right now. I went into a very important meeting where we were naming a product. This was back in my marketing communications days. And I had a brand new suit and I thought I just looked so fabulous. When I got home, the price tag was still hanging under my armpit, and I'm thinking this client thinks I'm a complete idiot. And I actually called them afterwards and said, oh my gosh, I just realized they didn't even notice. But it's a funny story. It's a mini Pearl story.
It truly is. It's like, oh, well, if we don't get this gig, I'm taking this the suit back because the tag's still on it.
Right, exactly. But so when we tell these stories, suddenly everybody laughs, everybody feels more comfortable.
Yeah, right.
And you do it in the right doses for sure.
All right. So here's another question about conversations. Who's better at it? Typically, male, female, introverts, extroverts, ambiverts. Who's better at it naturally?
That was like stump Patti. That's give Patti a question she can't answer. Well, I'll say what I have to say about that. I think, first of all, anybody can be a good conversationalist with the right skills and practice and mindset. Anybody can slip into being a bad one. I think females tend to share more. I'm trying not to make statements that are, ridiculously incorrect. But I think in general, women have an easier time sharing with each other and talking. And I think, I don't know if it's in our genetic makeup, that chromosome we have or, whatever. But I think women can socialize a little more easily than men. That said, it goes back to your cocktail napkin and girl, you're doing all the talking and you're not saying nothing. That can be true. I know some men that are really incredible listeners, and they're a joy to converse with. The introvert, extrovert, ambivert thing. Again, I know some very chatty introverts that if I am going to pick up the phone and call them, I better set aside an hour and they'll be exhausted and I'll be exhausted, but that's just their way of relieving tension in the conversation.
Right.
Some introverts are difficult to talk to because they'll not give you anything to work with. You'll ask a question and they'll say yes or no, or give you a 1-word answer. And it's like, I'm doing all the work here.
I've been there. You want to say, tell me more about that. I have nothing else to say.
Hey,
please, there is, but
and those are important words. Tell me more. Tell me something interesting. Listeners should write that one down because that one's golden. Extroverts can be a ton of fun. They bring energy to the room. They're continually energized by the people contact. They can sometimes do too much talking or be a little too much for introverts. So I think, an important part, and it's in my book, is self-assessing, what's my social personality? What are my tendencies? What are my strengths? What are my areas for growth? Can I get some feedback from people I love and who'll be kind in their feedback to me? And just to get clear on where you are. And there's a quiz in the book. I like quizzes too.
I love quizzes, right?
Yeah, they're fun. And then, start where you are and work to improve the things that you either struggle with or that maybe, get out of control, especially after, a couple of cups of coffee or a couple of cocktails, and become mindful and aware, like that part about right now, I'm talking more than 40 seconds.
I think that, yeah, you're fine. Because we want to learn from you, which is why I'm asking these questions.
Yeah.
So and that's funny, you said about, now I'm talking more than 40 seconds. I have had those moments too, where I'm going, there's way too much of my voice coming out. And I will literally, once I realize that, say, well, I need to stop talking right now. And I will call it both for them as well as for me. And it kind of breaks a little bit of the tension. Like, I know, I'm sorry. I'm sorry, I just threw up with words and I did not mean to go on with that. So can you answer this one question? Like, let me cut to it and such. So I've used that technique before.
And it's a good one too. I will say that someone who's done too much talking and then catches themselves is way better than the person who keeps on talking and has no clue that they have been dominating the conversation.
Well,
So,
I found
kudos to you.
Well, thank you. But what I've also found is, and this is not just with that comment, but once I got comfortable with kind of just making a little bit of lighthearted poking fun at me, then the whole conversation, people relax.
Exactly.
And so, but I had to go first. That was the courage part. I had to go first. Now, once in a blue moon, I'll do that. And they'll be like crickets and look at me like, yes, you are an idiot. Okay. And so that means I need to exit that conversation very quickly. But most are like, oh, thank goodness she's real. All right. So I want to talk about more about the benefits of why do this, because what you were saying are some of the characteristics. We'd have to learn to be a better listener, to have some courage, to be authentic, to figure out the space in ourselves, to be gracious to others, to get good at asking questions. I mean, there's some effort involved here to learn this. So I'd better have some good payoff. Okay. No going.
Oh, it's amazing. Well, for starters, and this is how I start my book too, because if people aren't convinced that it's worth the journey to become better at conversation, I want them to be convinced that this is worth it. And so I'm going to try to walk through them, and there's certainly subcategories, but as humans, we're wired for community, to connect. It was part of our survival. When man discovered fire and could stay up a little longer at night, they could be cooking food, and they had some time after the day's work, in a very very simple environment of survival, suddenly they could talk to each other. They could create songs. They could create their culture. They could share wisdom. They could laugh and be social. And suddenly that was when humans really started to really take off in civilization. So we're wired for community. We really need each other. Even if you think, I have my own job, I live in my own apartment, I'm, financially secure. Someday you're going to need something from somebody, and it's better to have that network in place than
to UPS guy or the Amazon delivery. Yeah. That's what you're saying. Okay.
It does not hurt to make friends with your postman, all that. So it's just part of who we are, and it's about community. It's also about our happiness. So this was a really fun thing that I learned. Like when you go to the grocery store and you're going through the checkout line, and maybe you're talking, it's a long line, and there's a person in front of you that has a bottle of wine in their cart that's your favorite, and you lean over and go, oh, that's my favorite. And you start talking about wine. That little moment is creating a little burst of oxytocin, which is our tend and befriend hormone. It makes us feel really good. And that hormone doesn't last in our bodies very long. So when we have those little encounters during the day with the dry cleaning lady, with the barista, with our pals at the gym, with our neighbor, waving at the neighbor, going, hey, how are you doing? What are you guys doing for the holidays? Or, what are you doing for your birthday? Those moments are so important, and we blow those off way too often. They're as important as the deep, meaningful, sitting over a pot of tea, and cookies, just sharing something really deep and meaningful. Those are also very important. So the short and long conversations are both super important. And that's our physiology. That's getting right down into our cells. Let's talk about
comment. I want to make it is that
sure.
That to me is you're mentioning before people, I hate small talk. Right. And one could look at those small moments as small talk. Once I realized those moments are really big moments.
Yeah.
Like, so small talk to me has big impact because it can typically lift someone in that moment. And that's the opportunity. I was actually literally last week going through the grocery store line instead of the self-checkout grocery store line. And there was a cashier there, and there was someone before me. And so I had a moment to put my stuff up on the little conveyor belt and watch the gal who was checking out. And she was sad. I could just tell by her demeanor. She was sad. And the person that she was currently checking out was just going through the transaction. Made no comment, hardly said anything. At the end, thank you, moved on. So I decided I want to see if I can put a smile on her face. And so as she was checking it out, I made a comment about the items that I bought. And it was true. And I was like, I got to let you know, I just came in to pick up one thing, but because I had to go from one side of the grocery store to another, and all your 2-for-1s, I've now got 2 of these, 2 of these, and 2 of these. It's working. And she laughed. Of course, she's not responsible for any of that.
Yeah.
But I simply said something that hopefully I wanted to make it in that way of, hey, you're part of the big thing. You guys are so smart, and she just laughed and put a smile on her face. And we went back and forth a little bit. And I didn't ask her why she felt sad. That really wasn't my business, nor was it appropriate with other people around to hear. I just thought, I am glad I have gotten over myself, that if I look like a fool, that's fine, as long as I can make somebody smile.
Yeah, those moments are so important. I posted the other day on Facebook about, going into the dressing room at Anthropology, and you go in your dressing room, you try on your outfit, and then you go out to see if anybody's going to give you any feedback, or use the bigger mirror that gives you more of a 3D look. And all of us women that were in there, we're all giving each other either compliments like, oh my gosh, if you don't buy that, you're crazy, or you look amazing, or that would be great, but maybe in a different color, and being honest with some kindness. Oh my gosh, I did that all morning from store to store. And one of the sales ladies in I think it was, I don't know, White House, Black Market, whatever store it was, she said, I love it when customers do that for each other. Because she said, no one's going to listen to us because we're the salespeople. They're going to think we're lying. When customers can be honest with each other and lift each other up, she said, it just makes our day better. It, obviously it helps sales. But more importantly, it's those little micro moments are huge. They're just huge in our happiness. And the more of those we can have, within reason, of course, you don't want to be crazy or anything, but why do we hold back and not interact with our fellow humans? And there are some definite attitudes that we've picked up over the years, like don't talk to strangers, that kind of thing, that a lot of people just observe sometime. Go through a store, go through a social scenario or a retail scenario or a restaurant scenario, and watch how often people totally ignore each other or totally blow off the server. They don't look in their eyes. They don't greet them. They don't say please or thank you. That's the civility piece and the caring piece that I think there's a huge gap in our society right now on people thinking, well, that's another person and they don't matter. They do matter.
They do.
You matter. We all matter.
You brought up is that this gives us happiness. We get oxytocin, we give it. I mean, it happens with, I think, both parties if both are open to it. But instead of it like, oh, I could say I did this wonderful little moment for this woman in the grocery store line the other day. Oh, I'm so giving. You know what? I got happiness out of that too. And so it mutual. Really is important that it's not just, oh, we're being so elevated.
Right. Well, here's the other thing. I would ask people that actually really, really hate small talk to sit and journal for a while on what's that really about? Like, what is it? Did you have a bad experience? Are you afraid? Are you worried about somebody being boring or less intelligent than you are? Or I don't know. I think it's worth reflecting on why are we not interacting? Why? What's that about? And explore the feelings behind that, because did something happen to you? Did someone tell you shouldn't talk to anybody or you're better than somebody else? It's a wonderful discussion point. People get into really interesting discussions just about that topic alone.
See, good questions. Okay, so you said two benefits I've heard.
Oh, wait a minute. Yes, I have more.
Community, our own happiness,
right?
Other people's, and what else?
And thank you for managing that conversation right there. You did a really good thing. Bring us back to what we were talking about.
That's why I'm
professionally.
I must do this professionally. You're right. Well,
we both do this professionally.
That's right. Getting better at it. All right. Anyway, go ahead.
So professional. Let's talk about professionally, your career, your job, your business. So it has been shown that being able to carry on a conversation on any topic, not just business topics. Like we're talking, you're hanging around the office, your fellow employees, or in a social networking setting, the ability to talk about many different topics to almost anybody with a certain degree of grace, pleasantry, all that, you are seen as automatically more successful and a more desirable employee or client or business than someone who can't do that. And again, any topic. We're not just talking about, oh, you can talk about stocks and bonds, or you can talk about tech stuff. You have the ability, you have a repertoire that you are someone who's pleasant to be with. You're a great member of the team. You're a fun person to do business with. You are sociable, kind, gracious, all those things. So that's a big one. I mean, it also is a way to collaborate, become more creative, more innovative, more intelligent. People like, if you go back to the industrial age of America, people like Henry Ford and Thomas Edison, they literally had their own little social groups that they would, get together with. There was one called the Wednesday 10. There was another one, I think Thomas Edison and Henry Ford had the Vagabonds, where they would go on road trips together. It was 8 of us packing a car and just, let's get away from work for a couple of weeks and just drive around and talk. And that was where they got some of their really good ideas, like a mastermind.
Mm-hmm.
It's like a mastermind.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So
hold on though. You said from that description, you said a repertoire of topics.
Mm-hmm.
So do I have to go out and learn a whole bunch of stuff on a whole bunch of topics before I can have this conversation? Is there a shortcut? What if I don't have the time to have all knowledge on so many different topics and I don't even know who I'm talking to or going to talk to and what topics they're interested in?
Well, then you can go back to curiosity and use those words. Tell me more about that. Or let's say you're talking to someone and they've just gone off on they're on to a topic that you don't know anything about. And you're already, they're like way over your head already. You can, pause, hit the pause button, interrupt them kindly, of course, and say, wait a minute, you're going into a topic that I don't know that much about. Can you give me a little background on this? Can you explain this to me in a way that I might understand? Like, give me some background and some context here on what this is all about. Why is it important? And that's where you can use your questions like a journalist would, or, back when I was in my marketing communications copywriting days, I was talking to engineers all the time about computers and software, and they were talking about how they designed them and how they worked. And I was wanting to know, well, what does this actually do? And why should anyone care? And so does that sound familiar?
Oh yeah. What an insult! Like this person, Patti doesn't know anything.
Yeah. So gosh. I mean,
child. Yeah.
So again, you can manage the conversation, but going back to how many topics, we all have stories. We can ask about other people's stories. Who was your favorite first grade teacher? What movie most impacted you as a teenager? What books are on your nightstand and why? Who would be your, fantasy dinner guests? If you could have anybody living or dead come to dinner at your house, who would you have sitting around your table? I mean, we can all manage a conversation and talk about things like that. And they're fun. And surprisingly, they kind of shake things up.
For others, they're like rolling their eyes. Because I've tried this many times with my own family to try. Let's just have some random conversations or these cards that, there's all kinds of things where they're pre-formed questions. And they just didn't really want to go there on that one. So you have to always know your audience, right?
But you're related to these people?
I know. I'm compensating for perhaps that. That's pretty funny. Maybe one of them will listen or not. I'm not really sure. But anyway, that's...
But you said topics. How many topics do I know? I mean, I think, who was it? Dale Carnegie said it's better to be interested than interesting. And I think that's really important.
That's essential. That's what I'm getting the essence of.
But you can become interesting by expanding your repertoire of topics. You can talk about more than your cat or your kids or your latest really geeky project. I mean, I think as humans, we can become more multidimensional. And that has to do with the caring piece, caring enough that you want to be a better conversation partner. And if you're someone who doesn't care about being a better conversation partner, then the work I do and the books I write aren't for you. And I'm sad about that, but that's the way it is.
How's that so far? I hope listening to our conversation put a smile on your face and inspired you to create uplifting conversations of your own. And now for the after party I call Flip the Chip, where I take a few minutes to highlight something my gal pal shared that can help us all flip a challenge or a difficulty that's holding us back into something more positive that helps us move forward. What I want to highlight today is what Patti said about the quality of your conversations. She said, quote, "If you're in a conversation that's not going the way you want it to, you have the power to manage it, shift it, walk away from it. You also have the responsibility in social settings to introduce yourself." Here's Patti's short list of what to do to have better conversations. Number 1, be a good listener. Hearing with your ears is easy. Truly listening and thinking about what the other person said is a deliberate learned skill. Number 2, demonstrate mutual respect by sharing talking and listening time. Number 3, have the courage to be authentic and vulnerable. 4, offer grace if you have a difference in opinion. Not everyone has to think like you. 5, be curious by asking good questions. And number 6, be a possibilitarian, wondering what great conversation is possible. Which of these behaviors do you need to focus on to have better conversations? If you aren't having the conversations you want, remember, you have the power to change it. Just like you have the power and the choice to change up your nail color. You will have to stay tuned, though, for part 2 of my conversation with Patti to hear the nail color name she created. You can make good choices to create the career, business, and life you want. One step, one nail color, one conversation at a time. Look forward to being with you next time on the Live Like Your Nail Color podcast.
Thanks for listening to the Live Like Your Nail Color podcast. Ready to live and laugh more? Know a friend who could use some of that too? Then subscribe at liveLikeYourNailColor.com or your favorite podcast app and share this episode right now with the person who popped into your mind. Together, let's flip the chip to be stronger, smarter, and happier.